Adult responses don't begin with what we say. It begins with what we believe. And inside of youth serving settings, classrooms, after school programs, interpretation can happen so fast. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. I've been on the receiving end of this as a young person. A student rolls their eyes. A student sighs loudly. A student avoids work. And before we consciously think about what's happening, sometimes our brain has already assigned meaning. This isn't something that has ill intent. Sometimes it's human nature. But we think disrespect. We think lazy. We think, oh, this child is testing me. And that interpretation happens in milliseconds. And here's what's important. It often happens subconsciously. Our brains are wired for pattern recognition. We scan for threats. We compare present behavior to past experiences. If we've seen similar behavior escalate before, our nervous system prepares for escalation now. But when you're dealing with young people and you're trying to give them the green light to be great, when you're dealing with fragile young people, young people who need more emotional support than others, speed isn't always accuracy. Because the same behavior can mean different things depending on the context. A student sighing could be signaling overwhelm or boredom or frustration or embarrassment. The behavior is visible, the meaning is assigned, and the meaning we assign determines our tone. Often if we interpret behavior as defiance, right, our tone sharpens. If you interpret behavior as stress, your tone may slow. And Bruce Perry pushes this further in What Happened to You, when he reframes the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. That shift doesn't excuse behavior. It slows judgment. It invites curiosity, because interpretation directs your response. You're not just observing behavior. You're deciding what it means, and what it means determines what you do next. A sigh interpreted as disrespect produces correction, but that same sigh interpreted as overwhelm produces support. Same behavior, different direction. This is a best practice to implement if you're committed to offering the green light to be great for every child, by offering high quality, social, emotional support layered in empathy and understanding. Be aware of what you are feeling and challenge your assumptions, because the first thought about a child's behavior may be automatic, but that second thought is one that can be chosen. It's powerful, the opportunity that you have to shape a child's life, because your interpretation becomes that child's internal narrative. It confirms the negative self-talk they are already dealing with. And when adults, when teachers and educators, who are often some of the safest adults in our lot, in the type of young people that we serve in their lives, that's who they're spending the most time with. When they reinforce those interpretations, even in a subtle manner, then they are solidified. I've seen this in education and youth development settings repeatedly. Young people being labeled aggressive, dramatic, manipulative. And then those labels, they follow them into every room and every space and every circle for years. But here's what shifts everything. When we stop interpreting behavior as character, our responses, they stop being punitive. Instead, we interpret behavior as a skill that's underdeveloped. Then the response can become instructional. Now, this isn't us lowering standards. It means we're separating identity from action. And this can show up in the words that we use. Instead of "you're disrespectful," we can say that response wasn't appropriate. Instead of "you don't care," you can say, I can see that you're frustrated. Let's slow this down. Remember, you are dealing with sensitive young people who are living with constant adversity, who can be triggered even by the best of our efforts. And here's the thing, the way they respond, the survival mode that they live in, it's not their fault. I love the question, what happened to you? This question, it changes posture. Instead of asking what's wrong, we ask what might have occurred. And that shift changes tone. It changes the environment. It changes the culture of your classroom, of your entire building. I once mentored a young man who was labeled volatile. I mean, he escalated quickly. Most of our volunteers, they took it personal. But I had one staff member who had undergone empathy training, who had undergone trauma-informed training, who took it serious. And this staff member responded the same way every time. Staff member had a steady tone, a slow pace. The staff member didn't complicate language with sarcasm. The staff member didn't escalate. And over time, the young man stabilized. Stabilization wasn't a result of being lectured. It was he felt seen because someone interpreted him differently. For my teachers, interpretation determines tone. For leaders, interpretation determines language in staff meetings, which becomes climate in classrooms. Interpretation is intervention. It should be a key part of your efforts to support the young people that you educate every day. And correct interpretation can move us toward consistency. And consistency, it's giving your social, emotional support ecosystem, that web, it's giving it infrastructure. It's giving a solid foundation. And consistency is important because even the best interpretation fails without stability. In youth programs all over the nation, I noticed something consistent. Young people didn't respond the most to charisma. They responded most to consistency. The adult who greeted them the same way daily. The adult whose tone did not fluctuate wildly. The adult who followed through calmly. Dr. Perry explains in the book, What Happened to You? He explains, children need challenge to grow. But here's the thing, he says, but the challenge must be just right. Too much stress shuts down thinking. Too little stress prevents growth. And he explains that resilience is built through repeated, moderate stress support. And predictability, it protects against injury, emotional and neurological. And so, the key phrase for this episode is, moderate activation of your child's chest response. We need to be predictable and moderate. This is where consistency lives. And when we talk about consistency, we're not talking about lowering expectations. We're talking about dosing challenge correctly and the best way for the young people that we serve, that you serve. And What Happened to You, Dr. Bruce Perry describes development as a Goldilocks situation. The challenge can't be too big and it can't be too small. It has to be just right. Why? Because resilience is built through moderate activation of the stress response, not eliminating stress, not overwhelming stress, moderate stress. And this is what's critical about all of this. The stress has to be paired with predictable support. The green light should be great. The social emotional support that I want every teacher and every educator and every school and every district to adopt, to understand at least, to incorporate in some way. Because if a student is constantly overwhelmed, the cortex, the thinking part of the brain, it shuts down. If the demand exceeds their current regulation capacity, they don't build resilience, they build avoidance. And in the classroom, what feels like a reasonable challenge to most students, it's overwhelming to a child with a sensitized stress response because they're living with constant adversity. They're living with memories of trauma. They're living largely inconsistent lives. And that's why in the place where they're spending most of their time, where they're going to spend approximately 16,000 hours from kindergarten to the 12th grade. That's why consistency matters, because predictable adult tone becomes part of the healing process. It's predictable correction. It's predictable encouragement. It's predictable response to failure. Dr. Perry explains so elegantly in this book that growth happens through repeated exposure to achievable challenge that's close enough to the child's current capacity that they can succeed with encouragement and repetition. That's what consistency looks like. Not intensity, not emotional durability, rhythm. Because you can't build resilience in chaos. You build it in structure. Consistency looks like predictable expectations, predictable consequences, predictable repair. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be predictable. Students test stability before they trust it. They are silently asking, are you a safe place? Are you steady? Are you consistent? And when the answer becomes yes, resistance, it drops. Predictability reduces. It reduces the stress response. For leaders, if adult emotional tone varies building wide, your social emotional learning outcomes and goal cannot scale. Consistency is the infrastructure that you need. And when we talk about consistency, we're not just talking about classroom management. We're talking about safety as a foundation for development. Dr. Bruce Perry explains in What Happened to You that a child who feels loved and safe will choose to leave their current comfort zone because safe and familiar becomes boring. A safe and stable child becomes curious. They explore. They try new things. They take risk. But young people who are facing adversity, constant adversity, who feels unsafe, they don't want novelty. They want predictability. They want control. They want stability. This is an essential rule of healthy development. A sense of safety and stability provides the foundation for growth. That changes how you can view challenges in your classrooms. Because resilience is not built through chaos. It's built through moderate stress paired with predictable support. Dr. Perry explains also that when someone has experienced chaotic or prolonged stress, which we call constant adversity, especially early in life, their brain processes input from the bottom up. The lower part of the brain, we're going back to it, the survival systems activate faster than the thinking cortex. That's why some of your students are reacting before they think. And you're like, and you may say, what are you thinking? They're not. They're not thinking. They're just reacting to a perceived real threat in their mind. But your response, responding with empathy in a consistent manner, is what's going to make regulation possible. And there's four core ideas around what a consistent healing environment could look like in this book. Number one is crisis-based systems. They fail because they are inconsistent. Think about it. Sometimes it's one appointment a month. There's not enough therapists to fill the need. Sometimes it's 15-minute visits. Usually there's 3 sessions before before a dropout, before the child stops showing up. That's not rhythm. That's not repetitive. That's not predictive. That's not predictable. And healing doesn't happen in stable environments. Number 2, we got to remember regulation must come before reasoning. Dr. Perry says problems with regulating must be addressed before relational or cognitive therapies can work. Number 3, healing, it's relational and distributed. This therapeutic web concept is crucial. It means, this is not a downplay on therapy. I am an advocate for young people having access to the best therapy possible. But healing does not happen in 1 hour a week, not alone. It happens through multiple safe interactions throughout the day. That includes teachers, that includes coaches, that includes bus drivers, this includes administrators, this includes the food service workers, the security guards. Number 4, rhythm and repetition regulate the brain. And so we need to be offering responses that are rhythmic, relational, and predictable. That's consistent. We're not looking for intensity. We're not looking for emotional ups and downs. We're looking for rhythm. And here's the key shift I think schools should make when it comes to social emotional support and curating these type of environments that promote healing for young people who are facing constant adversity. We need to realize that therapy is not going to be the primary intervention for most children. Relationships are. There's still an access to therapeutic services. There's an issue across this nation. But in schools, adult consistency can become part of the therapeutic web. When Dr. Perry talks about healing, he makes something very clear. Therapy alone is not enough. And what happened to you, he explains that most people who experience adversity don't have access to intensive clinical care. On the episode with a therapist this season, she said the same thing. She highlighted adult response. Brianna Dodds. But what actually predicts positive outcomes isn't therapy alone. It's access to multiple invested, caring people throughout the day. A student doesn't spend most of their week in a therapist's office. They spend it, yes, in classrooms. They spend it in hallways. They spend it with adults who may not see themselves as part of the intervention, but they are. But you are. Healing requires moderate, predictable, controllable interactions. And I'll say it again, predictable, not chaotic. We want student outcomes. Every teacher, every educator needs them, but we can't move into cognitive work. We can't ask young people who are facing adversity to reason and have insight and reflection until regulation is addressed first. Healing doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through repetition. Rhythm, relational, steadiness, that's the consistency I want teachers and educators to be empowered to provide. You may not be the therapist, but your predictable tone, your steady response, your calm correction, your follow through, your increased emotional intelligence, that becomes part of the student's regulation system. Consistency isn't just good teaching. It isn't just social emotional support. It's literally a nervous system medicine. And it works. I've experienced it. I've read the research. I want everyone to shift their thinking. I want teachers and educators all over the nation to own their role in providing social emotional support and to not view it as something additional. It's something that you can do using the words and time and energy that you're already expending. Because you know that crisis systems are inconsistent and ineffective because you keep worrying about the same students. The same students are causing disruption in your classrooms. You understand now that healing equals a relational web, distributed support. You know it takes a village. You know that regulation comes before reasoning. You understand that rhythm, repetition, and consistency is the key to giving the green light to be great. And so hopefully after listening to this podcast, you've moved from consistency is helpful to consistency is necessary. Because here's the thing. I've had some of the greatest teachers in the world, and I've had teachers that I remember because of how they made me feel in a negative way. And the greatest teachers I've had, they had empathy. They were curious about my life. And that's how you go from good teaching to great teaching. Is being one of the teachers, the few teachers that I could look back on and know that they really cared. Well, until next time, this is the Green Light to Be Great podcast with the Raymond Omar Long. And thank you, every teacher and every educator, every youth worker that's listening for what you do to empower young people. See you next time.